A quick video for you here on writing to your MP, how and why, or more to the point, why and how in that order. If you'd rather know how straight away, feel free to skip to the timestamp in the description, because if you're already convinced about why, you're a young person and you've got no attention span or patience, then skip forward. But let's deal with why first. This is at a request of my dear friend Alison C. Harpy128 from Twitter. We're still on Twitter, just about. Also on Mastodon, I just noticed, so I'll be adding her there. Because she was asking about... now, we're talking in the context of the Save ENO campaign in the light of the Arts Council England's decision last week to remove their NPO status, or not to grant them NPO status for the next 3 years at least. I'm not going to get into the particulars of that campaign because there's a lot of talk about that already, so I'm just going to talk in general terms about writing to your MP and other forms of campaigning, although I might refer to the ENO situation as a current example where it is enlightening. So Alison says, I'll write to my MP to protest as an audience member, but are there any thoughts on what should I ask her to do, please? She's likely to be sympathetic, Labour in London, but it might be good to suggest a practical course of action. Now, two things here. Let's take the ENO campaign as an example. Now, they've got a petition up and running. Let's talk about petitions versus MPs' letters. Petitions are fabulous and they're a great first starting point for a campaign. They're a little bit tricky because if you put them on the Parliament website, you have to be quite specific in what you're asking in the petition, which means that it has to be something that the government or Parliament can specifically do. So you can't ask for, Magnum PI reruns on ITV4 because that's not within Parliament's remit. But you could ask for a public inquiry into, for example, the Arts Council England decisions for future funding. The problem is that the more kind of specific you get on that front, the less emotive the campaign message is, the petition question is, which sort of impacts on perhaps how much it grabs the public's attention. That's kind of the circle you're trying to square. What you can do if you want to stick with your more emotive question, and this is what's happened with the ENO petition, is that you can stick it on change.org or one of the non-Parliament websites. The downside of that is that there's no obligation, and this is what I'm going to come to with MPs' letters, for Parliament to consider a petition via another website, whereas with Parliament petitions, once they get over a certain threshold, they have to be considered for debate in Parliament. Something to note about that is that doesn't necessarily mean that Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are going to go at it hammer and tongs in the House of Commons over it. It might mean that it just gets a mention in a Westminster Hall meeting or so on, and that's normally how they fob these things off. So the point about petitions is that politicians are free to ignore them, right? Just as if you write, let's take the ENO example in this instance. Let's say you write directly to the Department for, DCMS, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. So the first hurdle is trying to pronounce it. That's deliberate. I'm sure that's deliberate. But you can write directly to DCMS, but they're not obliged to respond. They're not accountable directly to you as a constituent. Neither are Arts Council England. Neither is any other government department or the Prime Minister or anything like that. They're not directly. This is not how democracy or constitution works. The conduit for your democratic opinion is your MP. And that can be a very powerful thing. It can be frustrating, but if you learn how to channel it, it can be very powerful. And the rule of thumb is that politicians are free to ignore a petition, even if it's got 10 million signatures. They're free to ignore a protest, or outlaw them, in fact. They're free to ignore an angry tweet or 100 angry tweets or whatever. But they're not free to ignore a letter to them as an MP from a constituent. Constitutionally, they're obliged to respond to them. Now, there's a little bit of a fudge around that because, of course, we don't have in the UK an entirely written constitution, or not written down in one place, and much of it is unwritten, so it's kind of convention. But conventionally, they are obliged to respond to a letter to them from their constituent. So that's the first thing to note, is these are incredibly powerful constitutional tools. That is by design. This is how the system is designed to work. Okay. The other point about an MP's letter is that an MP is in a uniquely powerful position, any MP, to put pressure on their party leadership. Ultimately, kind of aside from any other consideration, anything that a politician does is designed to win them votes at the next election. If you can show that their actions are likely to lose them votes, not you, individually in terms of your vote, that you are considering changing your vote or withdrawing your vote at the next general election, then that hits home. And put together, and this is how collective democracy works, is that put together enough of those messages will send a very strong signal and put very strong pressure on any government. That's what's happened. That's what's happened with government U-turns over the last few months, or many of which have caught the headlines. The point is that they put forward any policy on the basis that it's going to be a vote winner. If you can show it's going to be a vote loser for them, especially in vulnerable constituencies, and frankly, at the moment, for the government, that's all of them, then they can, each individual MP can put pressure on their party leadership, and put together that can be very, very powerful. We've seen that over the last few months. The evidence of that is 3 different prime ministers in a year. So there you are. I hope I've convinced you that it's important. Now, I'm not saying don't sign a petition. Absolutely, you should. I'm not saying don't use social media. Absolutely, you should. But the number one thing you can do as a UK citizen, as a UK voter, to make a difference in terms of the clout that one action has, is to write to your MP. I hope I've convinced you of that. So before you do anything else, if you're thinking of I'm going to pen this killer tweet or this killer Facebook post or whatever it is, before you do that, consider spending that time picking up a pen and paper and writing to your MP. I promise you it will have more impact than anything else you can do unless you run a government department. Then go and do the other stuff. I'm not saying don't do the other stuff. Talk to friends and encourage them to get involved and all that. All right, so that's the why. Here we are at the how. Now, the first thing to note, again, none of this is written in stone because we have an unwritten constitution, but conventionally, a written letter will have more impact than an email. Now, the reason is that the MP's responsibility to you is based on where you live, okay? So if you're writing to them from home, and conventionally you write on a letter and you make sure you include your address at the top of it, then they are obliged. They have a constitutional obligation to represent you on this issue. If you have to write an email, that's fine. Just do make sure that you include your home address on it, your constituency address, and make it clear at the beginning of the letter or email that you are writing as a constituent. That gives you infinitely more clout than if you're writing to, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak or whoever, if you don't live in their constituency. Because if they are your constituency MP, they are, on paper, obliged to respond to you, and almost always they will, eventually. Okay, so make it clear that you're writing in your capacity as their constituent, and you're writing to them in their capacity as your your constituency MP. So you can include something, right at the beginning. As your constituent, I'm writing to you, yada, yada, yada. Now, the more of a personal viewpoint you can include, the better. What do we mean by that? Well, there's a lot of MP letters templates out there on particular issues. I am responsible for writing some myself on issues I'm involved with. And there's no reason not to use them if you're not particularly comfortable or haven't got time writing your own words on the topic. But if you can do that, if you can write your own words, then they will again carry more weight than something. It's pretty obvious when something is a template that you've cut and pasted from wherever, copy and pasted. So include, if you can use your own words as much as possible, please do. If you're going to use a template, any point at which you can include your own experience, again, carries more weight, because the MP's obligation is to represent your interests. You can go, you can, of course, write going, I think swans are wonderful and should be protected. But if you can demonstrate to them that that affects your life directly, then that's their obligation to you as their MP. So let's take the English National Opera example. If you write to them saying, I think English National Opera is wonderful and should be protected, that's one thing. But if you can write to them, if I wrote to them as a singer, I would say, as a professional opera singer, the continued thriving existence of English National Opera is crucial to me as a British opera singer working in the UK and presenting my wonderful work to UK audiences and so on. If you're anyone who works for one of those companies, then it's pretty obvious what you're going to write. But if you're an audience, it's probably even more impactful. But it might take a little bit more thinking to work out how it impacts on you, or to focus the letter on you. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. You don't be modest. It's about you. This letter is about you and about the impact on you. So if you're an audience member, if you're a regular opera goer at ENO, if you've been once, if you've never been but always wanted to go and was, maybe you were saving up or waiting till you could afford it. Not that it's expensive. That's kind of the point here. But even so, put it in terms of the impact on your life. If ENO ceases to exist, then this is how it will affect me. It will make my the emotional richness of my life and my cultural attachment to my identity as an English person far more the poorer, or something like that. Don't use those words. You can come up with something better yourself. That's the point. But that's the point I'm making, is focus it on you. Don't be shy. It's about you. It's about the impact on you. And the more you can make it about you as their constituent, the more your MP can help you and can carry that message forward. So your own words are more powerful than a template. You know how to write a letter. I was going to say sign it at the bottom. You know how to do that. What else have I got? Okay, so you've sent off the letter or the email. Then what happens? Oh, sorry, I should tell you. How do you find your MP's address? You can find it on the Parliament website, and I will post that in the video description below, because I forgot to look it up before I started recording. But they're all on there. You will find how to write to them. It's always at the House of Commons, but usually their constituency address as well. You can find their preferred form of address, so Mr. Ms. or just their name or whatever, and it will be on there. So don't need to worry about that. And you should also find their email address as well. Again, if there's a choice between writing them at the House of Commons or writing to them at their constituency address or office, pick the constituency address. It might seem counterintuitive, because you might think, well, they'll be at the House of Commons, I'll get to them more quickly, but they'll have people in those offices monitoring dealing with that mail, and as I say, you're appealing to them as their constituency MP. And then, okay, you've sent the letter, you've sent the email, then what happens? Well, then, if you should hear back, and certainly, okay, let's talk about the content of the letter. What are you asking them to do? Now, don't get too stressed. People get stressed about it, and I feel like this as well. I go, well, I want them to fix this problem, but I don't know how to fix it. It's not your job to fix it. It's theirs. It's their job to come up with ways of fixing the problem about which you are concerned. So emphasize how this situation, what situation you're talking about, how concerned you are about it, and how it impacts on you. Now, if there are obvious ways in which they can act to help, then do include them. But if you can't think of what should be done about the future of English National Opera by your MP, or what should be done about Save the Whales by your MP, don't let that stop you writing. The important thing is that you get across the fact that you are concerned about this issue, and they therefore are obliged to be concerned about it too, because you're their constituent. Okay, so don't let that hold you back. What you should do, however, is request a reply politely. The more politely you can put all of this, the better, without diluting the sort of passion of your belief on this issue. And you should directly request a response from them on this issue, on this, a reply to this particular letter or email. If you don't get one, what do you do? Well, you can follow up roughly, let's say within 2 weeks, follow up with another letter or an email, or you can make a phone call, or if you feel particularly confident on discussing this issue with them and particularly moved by it and affected by it, you can ask for a surgery appointment. That's not always easy, especially if your MP is a cabinet minister, and so on, but you shouldn't be shy about doing it. They can always say no. Just bear in mind that if you meet them face to face, you will have to discuss the issue with them, so you may feel that you want it to be on an issue on which you feel confident in terms of the details and so on. And two, that you'd be surprised, they're quite good at this. It may not always come across like that, but when you meet MPs face to face, they are quite good at this. So you have to, so you may feel, that if you don't feel confident enough to engage with them, to lock horns with them directly on any of these issues, then don't feel obliged to ask for a surgery appointment. But definitely follow up with another letter or an email. And I would say a great combination might be to start with a written letter, and then follow up with an email. As I say, I think I mentioned that this is kind of a grey area. A lot of people say that they are obliged to respond to a written letter, but not to an email. These are unwritten rules. But I think a good combination with most MPs is to write on paper. I don't want to get old Jacob Rees-Mogg on you, but write on paper, post it, and then 2 weeks later follow up with an email. If you feel, and then every 2 weeks until you get a response. And once you've got a response, feel free to keep writing to them, especially as things develop. So that's the thing to emphasize, is that they're your MPs. Don't be shy about this. It's a bit like sending Christmas cards. The people that send a round-robin Christmas email, I know who you are. It's not quite the same as sending a physical Christmas card, is it? Because you know that took effort to write. So it does take effort to write. And that's kind of what gives it that weight. So a hard copy, pen and paper, and an envelope and a stamp really does carry a lot of weight. And then you can remember to ask for a response, a reply to that particular message. If you don't get a reply within 2 weeks or so, then follow up with an email and keep following up until you get a reply. And once you do get a reply, feel free to enter into ongoing correspondence on the issue. Okay. I think that's plenty for now. I thought this was going to be about 5 minutes and we're pushing 20. So I hope that's enough for you to be going on with. If I've missed anything, if there are any questions, please feel free, or comments, or criticisms about my hair or whatever, please feel free to, or the lighting is awful, I know. Leave me a comment below, or please get in touch on Twitter, as long as it's still going. Haven't checked today. Or Mastodon, don't know how that works, but I'm on it. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, email via my website, paulcareyjones.net, link in the description, or any other channel. If you see me in the street, please stop me. I won't know the answers, but I'll be happy to look them up for you. Okay, good luck, happy campaigning, and see you next time.